And speaking of Twitch branching out, this is also the first podcast that we've done since the announcement of TwitchCon.
Oh, TwitchCon.
Which they announced to something like 25,000 people were in the stream at the time. They hyped it they hyped it quite a bit.
Yeah.
Everybody knew what was coming,
But still came to the stream.
everybody showed up.
Yeah.
And which wasn't that like 24,999 more people than usually come to the Twitch
I think
stream?
so. I think that's why they hyped it so much. I wonder how their numbers have been doing since then, but because now I get the alerts all the time.
Yeah.
But yeah, so yeah, and then there've been a lot of articles about Twitch recently. There's been a lot of coverage of Twitch recently. And
Sure.
one of the articles made this quote: Twitch is part of the evolution of our culture. You don't particularly have to get it, just understand that it's important to a lot of people and it's here to stay.
Yeah.
So I guess for me, the question I'll throw out there is kind of, we see Twitch moving in these different directions. They're adding more things. They're doing a conference now. What does this kind of mean for Twitch? And then what does it kind of mean for the coming of age of gaming content generally?
Sure. So I think mainstream media is just gonna have a hard time understanding like Let's Playing and Twitch streaming for a while. There's still the Twitch sale for $1 billion, right? That was in the summer. Like it was it was almost a year ago. We're getting up to that point. It's like people are still like, wait, people do what with video games?
Yeah.
Like, and these are people like media experts and pundits that are like, well, I don't understand.
Yeah.
And so I think it's going to be that way for a while. However, everything Twitch does at this point is I don't think it's so much about cementing what they do as a business. Like, they've got that down. They're making money hand over fist. I'm sure they're doing fine. But it's like kind of validating what they do as a business. Like, this is what we do, and it works, and here's why it's important. And things like the TwitchCon, things like fully embracing partners, things like getting all this press over and over and over again. Just the other day I was listening to something on NPR about Meerkat, and Twitch came up. Right, so I mean, it's there now, and it's just going to become more and more of like a thing. I think that comment is totally correct. Like, understand it or not, here it is, man. Like, you may as well understand it because it's not going away.
Right.
And I think Twitch is, I'll call it their hunt for validation. I don't know. Like, in my mind, they don't need validation. But then again, like, we're gamers. We understand that. The 45-year-old soccer mom, Twitch maybe still needs validation to them. Yeah. Maybe that's important. But I think their hunt for validation is going to be even more important now that YouTube is like, oh, look what we're doing now. We're live streaming now. We're focusing on esports, and so it's, let's gobble up all the market share we can before YouTube tries to stick its face in here and pull from us or keep people from joining Twitch, that kind of thing. I don't know. I mean, I've got this. This is my expression with the YouTube Twitch thing. It's like, what's going to happen over there? Like how's YouTube gonna plant its flag over here? So I don't know. What do you guys think?
Well, I think that you're right about the validation piece. I think the interesting thing about gaming streaming and Twitch streaming is that, like, despite Twitch being around and Justin TV being around for so long, there's like still so much that they could or should do, in my opinion, with their platform technologically, with like facilitating. Like, we still don't understand what the, like, we understand that like a community exists around streaming, right? People have fans, that there's that celebrity aspect, but like at least in my opinion, there's a lot still left to be discovered around like the whys and the best practices of like running a community, and like I mean, even just, this is anecdotal whatever, but like thinking through like what happens when you just like sit there and watch a Twitch stream and like the chat, and how like sometimes it can be just like horrifying, or it can be like too fast, or it can be like the content creator only addresses certain people, and like there's just like a lot of questions around like how do you take this from like, we discovered it because Justin TV discovered like, oh wow, most of our people are gaming streaming, we should focus on that. Now they're there, like, and then now they're still discovering, like, there's just so much to go. So I think we're in like a not only hunting for validation, but they're like helping mature the medium, right? And having YouTube jump in is really good for this, I think, because as any capitalist would say, competition is good, right?
Sure.
And that's something I've heard expressed from YouTube folks is just like they're excited to get into the marketplace and compete with Twitch because they think it's going to increase the quality of all of streaming because they have another
and make them more money too.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, and your discovery point's really interesting. Twitch is like digital penicillin, man. Like nobody knew where that came from. It's like, oh, we're gonna stream everything, and out of that came like, this perfect thing, right?
Yeah.
It turned out to be the $1 million idea that nobody ever saw coming. The diamond in the rough or whatever.
$1 billion idea.
Yeah, $1 billion idea. I'm sorry, I didn't specify how many millions. So yeah, I don't know, man. Like, there's a strong part of me that thinks YouTube's just gonna screw it up somehow.
Yeah.
And I mean, nothing against YouTube, but there's different and competing interests. YouTube has had so much trouble with copyright in the past, and that when you're the biggest video game in town, that's what happens. Not video game, video comma game.
Yeah.
When you're video game, not damn forget. But like when you're really good at video, everybody notices, right? So they've had copyright problems forever, and it's where Content ID came from, and one of the biggest concerns from streamers is like, or even YouTubers now that might want to use YouTube for streaming, is like, what's going to happen with Content ID? What's going to happen? Are you going to apply it to live streams in real time and just take all my stuff down? Like, you're going to rip out all my audio? Like, is somebody going to put a content claim on my stream and get all the money? I assume they're going to monetize it somehow. Like, how does that work? And there's a strong part of me. It's like, YouTube's going to mess that up. Like, just because of the state of copyright.
Right.
There's no way you can mess it up.
Right.
And so I'm a little.
Yeah, and even
well, I mean, Twitch has the unique position, and I don't know how they've avoided this, where they still don't really have to address copyright.
Well, it's a legal thing, right? So I don't know this, but my hunch is, and maybe you can give me some feedback on this, is that so there's a big Viacom lawsuit, a while back against YouTube.
But from that comes Content ID,
right? Because Google lost that, and so. Or they settled it.
They settled it.
Right. So,
and Content ID was part of it.
Right. And so, as a part of the settlement, I imagine there are some stipulations around their, like, having to be proactive or some such sort of thing around copyright. So, they're under legal obligation to be stronger about how they address copyright because, not necessarily because Twitch is doing it right or wrong, but because no one's taking them to court to force them to do anything.
Yeah.
Right.
And so that puts YouTube in a unique position because you're exactly right. Like, what's different about streaming from the music perspective for YouTube, right? On Twitch, what they do is they let you play whatever music you want, and then in the VOD they rip your audio out if they detect the music.
Sure.
So. Is YouTube under some legal obligation to just mute you if they detect any sort of music while you're streaming? Like, who knows? Like, we'll see what happens. But there's a lot of factors like that are unknown. That
for me, that's the most interesting part of this is how is all of YouTube's past copyright issues going to come into play with live streaming?
Yeah.
And my biggest fear is they cook up solutions that are good enough but crap, good enough for them but crappy for the user, then manage to migrate over to Twitch, or just like becomes the way we handle copyright and the way of streaming, and that's going to be really. I think if that happens, nobody's going to win. That's kind of my gut feeling, but we'll see what happens.
Well, and it might be true too because the music companies are focused on YouTube, right? And the part of the reason that there's been so much coverage of Twitch and people are still going, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
Like, that's true of the music entities too. They have no idea what Twitch is, right? Or that they're playing their music. Some of them probably do, and Twitch probably does get takedown notices. But what do you do? And this is the other thing, right? YouTube, when it's video, right, you can send a takedown notice because that thing's out there. Yeah. But a stream happens, a song gets played. What do? You send a takedown notice? Like, at that point, you're done,
and
right?
You have to be there, right? Like, you have to be, and so maybe they just do the VOD.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's the deal, right? And so yes, just like in radio, like radio has to pay royalties. Technically, streamers should be paying royalties, or Twitch should be paying royalties for these songs. But on the other hand, how do unless I send them a notice that says some of your people have been playing my songs, and here's a list, and here's when they did it.
Yeah.
I'm going to sue you if they don't stop.
Yeah.
And then you've got to, I guess you're sitting there like taking screen captures of the stream so that you have proof that it actually happened, and then I mean there's all sorts of evidence problems and just a lot of things around. It's so much tougher. It's so easy to point at a video and say that has my stuff in it. It's so much tougher to go look at a stream and say that had my stuff in it.
Yeah.
You know, and so
especially,
and then who do you sue?
Yeah.
Do you sue the kid that's streaming? Do you try and sue the platform? The platform's going to sit there and say you didn't send me a takedown notice, even if you did. What do you want me to do about it? I'm taking it out of the VODs.
Yeah.
And then, you know, you're not going to get any money out of the kid. You're not, you know, Twitch is going to sit there with all sorts of defenses. It just becomes, from a legal perspective, it just becomes a nightmare, that particular lawsuit.
Yeah.
So it's going to be, it's easier to do with YouTube, right? Because content ID is there. And I think as Twitch becomes more well known, you'll have a couple of companies like a Viacom come in and say you can't use my music ever, and you might have some trouble there. I think you're still a ways away from that on the Twitch side because it's still not understood.
You don't think YouTube will accelerate that though? Just because YouTube is more understood,
right? But it's easier to go after Google. Right, it's easier to go after Google, and to a certain extent, you could go after Amazon. Right,
Yeah.
you could do it, but you know the mechanisms are already in place on YouTube. The lines of communication are already in place on YouTube. You know,
because it could maybe maybe using Content ID, people can just claim a stream. You know, if they just notice it, it's like. Claim, you know,
or streams, but that's the thing, right? With Content ID, you're putting in your piece of content, and then Content ID is just searching for it, right?
Yeah.
So if you stream and that song comes up, Content ID should be able to, may be able to recognize that.
It depends on how Content ID is architected. So like, it's a given that they're going to be taking all the VODs from these streams and passing through Content ID. That's a no-brainer. It's easy. So now, if they've been spending time to say introduce a delay into their live streaming and building a real-time content, that is insane. That boggles my mind. How the muscle it would take to do that.
Shazam does it.
Yeah, true. But like at YouTube scale, you're gonna have. I mean, it's easy to say you'll have hundreds of thousands of people that might be streaming simultaneously.
Yeah.
And so you have to have infrastructure in place to parse those streams in real time.
Yeah.
With an amount of delay that's acceptable to the end user.
Yeah.
Because there has to be a delay because you're passing it if you're passing it through some kind of real time Content ID.
Yeah.
And then you're matching that real time stream to some copyright and then muting it, like blacking it out. Like it's insane to me how you could even pull that off.
Well, and if that's true, that's a defense, right? That's a defense that Twitch would have. That's a defense that YouTube would have. They just say like, this is great. It's great that you want this, but it's not commercially viable.
Yeah.
I can't do it.
Yeah.
So take me to court every single time. You got to take me to court, and nobody, including a Viacom, is going to do that.
I would think a Twitch probably couldn't do it without investing lots of time into their version of Content ID.
Yeah.
YouTube is the best positioned to do it, but it is by no means an easy problem, and more importantly, it is by no means a cheap problem. That is a very expensive problem to solve.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
And you know, I think YouTube's only going to introduce this
if they have to.
If they have to, and you know, I mean, they're introducing this whole streaming platform to make money.
Yeah.
You know, YouTube doesn't make money.
Right.
That's a thing. I don't know if you knew.
Yeah.
YouTube loses money. Sure. I mean, maybe they made a little bit of profit this last quarter or something, but like they've been investing so much into the business that they haven't in the last 10 years or whatever. They've never made money. It's ridiculous, right? I mean, there's a lot of revenue but no profit. So, you know, it's hard. It would be hard to justify that, I feel like, unless they're legally required to. Now, on the other side of that, you know, there is an opportunity for the music side people to make deals with these content platforms to create more revenue for themselves, right? You know, say, hey, like, we're going to license you all of our, you know, just the ability for all your people to just use our music in their streams, not in their VODs, for X millions of dollars a year, you know, and it's already happening. Maybe they can monetize it somehow. It's interesting, you know. And then when you look at not just Content ID on video or on music, but on actual game content, right? That's another like question that's hasn't been answered, right? It's like, who owns this? You know, what's the fair use on the video game footage and let's plays and streaming, all this stuff. And so, you know, we saw recently, and we can talk about this. You know, Jim Sterling and his video getting taken down because the developer made a content ID claim on his video.
Right.
So you know, if content ID is baked into YouTube streaming, can developers just claim
take down streams? And would they? I mean, it seems dumb. But they could. I mean, if Nintendo wanted to come in and say, you're streaming Pokemon, not gonna happen, man.
Yeah.
Like, if content ID was baked into streaming, they could.
Yeah.
I don't think you're gonna see it. I'll be surprised if when they really fully unveil this and people are using it, if they have some kind of live content.
Right.
I mean, it almost doesn't make sense from a business perspective. Like it's one of those things I wouldn't do unless someone baked me.
Right.
You know.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of the reason why YouTube is one of its stated goals is to break into like esports, right? And so if they're going after Twitch's market share when it comes to things like big esports championships, you know, even the smaller esports competitions, I mean, you know, they're going to use, obviously there's going to be music used in these competitions, but most of that's been licensed, most of that's been taken care of by Riot Games or whoever.
And the games themselves are entirely happy to have their stuff streamed and promoted and stuff like that. So there is that whole partnership aspect to esports that doesn't exist across Let's Plays and reviews and stuff like that. So you're definitely going to get less pushback, right?
Absolutely.